Welcome to The People's View, a program dedicated to discussing local, state, and national issues and their effect on the American people. The People's View provides a platform for state representatives and national figures to present their viewpoint. Whether it's social, economic, or financial topics, you'll hear it on The People's View.
Welcome back, everyone, to another week of The People's View. Today, unfortunately, my side show guest, Carl Seidel, is not feeling too well. Hopefully he gets better, so I'm going to go solo today, but it's going to be easy with my guests coming up, especially with Laurie Sanborn, who is a fellow state rep with me. We actually sit right next to each other, both in leadership. We have our boss, DJ Betancourt, that keeps us in line. And Laurie's doing a lot of special things. She's a business owner, and she's also involved in the Business Coalition. So we're going to talk a lot about that today because what you're doing for the state is really good. And why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, give us your background, and
Sure.
We'll start with that.
Well, thanks. Thanks for having me here. It's really a great opportunity. You know, I'm a freshman legislator, and when I decided to run for office, I'm a small business owner. I looked around and it seemed like the prevailing issue of the day was jobs and the economy. That's what everyone talked to me about. That's what everyone was concerned about. So it's really what I focus on at the State House. And when I first was elected, I looked for a caucus, a pro-business caucus to join of legislators that were interested in the same topics that I was, and I was surprised to find none. So back last January, I created this group called the New Hampshire House Business Coalition. And we're a nonpartisan group of current House representatives who are really concerned about jobs in the economy. And we believe jobs come from businesses, and particularly our small business community in New Hampshire. And so we really want to promote legislation that helps businesses and doesn't hurt them. And so we have members, we actually have over 100 members, and we meet every week to review all the bills as they come through the House. And we have representatives in every single House committee, so that as they're hearing the bills come through the House, they really are listening with an ear for, will this create an unnecessary regulation on businesses that will maybe hurt them? Or will this help them in some way create jobs? And so that's what we do every week, and we've been very successful so far.
Well, I'm going to give I always have a section I call my civic section, because I think that we take for granted as being state reps, there's a lot of terminology, and you might have heard Laurie just mention caucus.
Yes.
So for people who don't know, that's an Indian term. It's just basically a meeting or a gathering of a group, and it's usually a selected group. So when we have caucuses for the Democrats or the Republicans, we're the ones that are in there, and it's usually a group that we focus on. So the caucus that you developed, is it particular types of businesses? Is it just all kind, or? All
kinds, and in fact, you don't have to be a business owner to be part of this caucus. The key membership is that you're interested in being pro-business, that you are a current elected House representative, and that you are actively following up on these issues. But that said, it actually is bipartisan, like I said, so we have Democrats and Republicans in this coalition. We're united, though, in our focus on being pro-business.
What are some of the, a lot of the people who are business people who are listening to the show, what are some of the most common things that keep coming up over and over, the concerns that would you say you hear most often?
Well, the key theme, I think, is regulation. Regulation costs businesses lots of time, lots of money, and it takes them away from doing their business. And if we could allow our business owners to focus on what they're trying to do, they hopefully will be able to hire more employees, grow, succeed, stay in business, all the things that we want. And sometimes legislators have great intentions, and we like to propose bills. But sometimes those bills have a negative consequence, and that negative consequence could be hours and hours of red tape and bureaucracy that a small business owner just doesn't have a lot of. So we look for those regulations, and let me give you a couple easy examples, and these are things that are never going to make the front page of a newspaper because they're not really very sexy, but they are important to the business owner. Last year we passed a bill that would allow a master electrician to have 2 apprentices work with him on the job versus 1, him or her. And that just frees up the opportunity to get more people trained as electricians. It saves costs for the person who's hiring the electrician, because now they can hire the master and 2 apprentices to get the job done.
So what was it before? So
They could only have one apprentice with every master electrician. And so we vetted it very carefully and saw that there was really no safety concern. And by doing this, it really would increase jobs.
now, I always like to try to compare things. So like, let's say our surrounding states, what are their rules? You know,
You know, I don't know in that regard, but that's another major theme that we look at, is we need to be competitive with other states. New Hampshire does not operate in a vacuum. We are always competing to attract employers, keep the employers we have here, keep the employees we have here. And so we always have to look at what our surrounding states are doing and make sure we're not more stringent than what they're doing. But I don't know in that particular regard.
that's just funny, kind of stereotypical. Laurie, who, as you know, sits next to me, now she's the business person. I'm just the opposite. I try to focus in on all these social issues. So we're completely opposite in that part of it. But one of the things I heard several times is that we're like one of the most regulated states. We have more regulations than like almost any other state, like more than like New York. You have any stats on that? Any figures?
You know, I don't have any stats that I really want to quote verbatim, but I will tell you that it's true. We have many laws that are much more stringent than federal, and that is so restrictive. And again, that's very non-competitive when we're competing with even Massachusetts or Vermont or Maine, when our laws are more restrictive than federal or more restrictive from theirs. One area that I know we've started to take a look at in the legislature is the amount of licensing we require. And some of that's been controversial because if you're a licensed professional, you like to, you feel very strongly about the education you've had, you appreciate the license that you have. Some consumers feel like it protects them, but sometimes maybe we've gone overboard. My understanding is we have twice as many, in some cases, licenses than other states. And in some cases, it could just maybe be a registry system where someone who's in a particular profession registers with the state so we can kind of keep track of them if there are complaints. But to actually force them to license and pay licensing fees and go through extensive training, in some cases makes sense. In other cases, I think it's something to look at.
Do you think that happened because of looking for ways for money because we don't have taxes?
That's a factor. You know, I think we don't have a broad tax base. The broad tax base that we do have is business profits tax. And because of that, I think we do a lot of fees and fines in our state. And when you add them all up, it's quite expensive. And I think the business community pays a disproportionate share of those fees. Every time you turn around as a business owner, there is a fee or a permit or an application process. And that's kind of what I'm talking about, that red tape, that extra bureaucracy that takes time away from running your business.
Well, we saw, this is only my second term, but we saw a classic example was last term, they passed this campground tax. Yes. So it was one of the biggest things, like it was funny, if you remember this first half of the term was the speed limit on the lake. We had more things about that than anything else, but the campers came out, they were mad. Yeah. And they came out and there was a couple of them, of groups that had these big, like bivouacs, I guess, that they would do every single year up here. And they said, okay, this year we're going to go to Maine. And because of all that, we ended up repealing it. But
thank goodness we did, because, you know, the laws that we are creating at the State House have consequences. And if we send the message to people that we don't want their business here, we don't want them to come here, they will leave. They have choices. And tourism is a major industry for New Hampshire, so we have to be very cautious. We have one of the highest rooms and meals taxes in the country. You know, and that's another whole topic that the Business Coalition is looking at, is tax reform whenever possible. Now, some of it's policy-driven and not tax rate, but let me give you a couple examples of things that we passed that make a really big difference for business community. One of those is the DRA, which is New Hampshire's IRS, was aggressively auditing our small business owners, our sole proprietors, our partners, our LLC owners, and they were going after them saying that they were paying themselves unreasonable compensation. And then they were taxing that excessive compensation, which was their personal income, as business profits. And what would happen in those audits is the DRA put all of the burden of proof on that small business owner to prove that they were worth what they were paying themselves. That's a really hard thing for a small business owner to do. They're busy doing many different things, running the business, cleaning the place, hiring people, marketing, you know, everything. And for them to try to come up with what is a realistic rate for all of those skills, all of those abilities, all that time that they're putting in is incredibly time consuming and expensive when you take into account accountants, lawyers, those types of things. So what we did this past year is just make it more fair, and we changed the burden of proof from that taxpayer, that small business owner, to the DRA. Once the business owner proved that they are actively involved in the business and they were doing things there, then the burden of proof changed to the DRA so that now they have to prove that what you're doing is excessive and not worth the money you're paying yourself. That really changed things and leveled the playing field.
So how long has that been in effect?
That just took effect in 2011, so it will be most relevant for 2012 right now. So that's exciting. Another big one that I want to mention, and again, this is if you're in a business, you'd really see the effect of this, is our net operating loss carry forward provisions. And that's a little bit technical, but right now, well, before we passed the law, New Hampshire is one of 2 states in the nation that limited the amount of losses you could carry forward from one year to the next against your business profits tax. You know, we want to keep our businesses here, even if they're having a tough time, and we need to give them a little break if they've had a period of loss, and let them try to regroup, succeed, then grow and hire again. And when you don't let them carry forward their losses, they're still paying excessive profits tax on profits they don't have. And so we were one of 2 states, made us very uncompetitive, that had this limitation. We still have a limitation, but we've dramatically expanded it. So it was a limitation of $1 million of losses you could carry forward, and we expanded that to $10 million. That makes us much more competitive. So especially if we have like a high-tech company or a new biotech company looking at where should they move their business or start their business, you know, they tend to have losses for a few years because they have so much R&D. And we want to attract those businesses here, even though we know for a couple of years they may not contribute business profits taxes. We're hoping that eventually they will, because they'll do so well, and by letting them carry forward some losses, it really does help them.
See, and that's how I tie it back into the social issues. The reason they probably come up with a lot of these different taxes, licenses, fees, whatever you want to call them, is because of different social programs they have to fund. Not really a social program, but in a sense it is. One of a constituent, he's not here anymore, he contacted me. He was from Nashua, and he worked at a kind of a company, what you're talking about. It was a software startup type of thing, and he was doing it for like about a year, a little over a year, and they went out of business. So he got laid off. He was collecting. In the meantime, and he's like 26 years old, I think he said he is. I'll have to show you I have the email actually I sent to Sean to go through some of this, but he went to work over the Christmas holiday at one of the stores in the mall, working part-time at $7 and I think he said 60 cents an hour. Long story short is he didn't realize, but by doing that he was violating his unemployment benefits.
Yeah, unfortunately you can't collect unemployment and work at the same time. Yeah.
So he ended up getting fined, like they wanted $5,000, they wanted all of it back. He only made like $1,800 with the part-time job, but now they're suing him for all the money back. And like he said to me, he said, so this is the incentive I get. I should just stay home, not get a job until I actually have one to then go away, but not meantime do something on the side as well. Yeah. And that's why I always say, you go to you can't go to a McDonald's or a Burger King and not see a help wanted sign. But when you can make the equivalent of what you're going to make there by sitting home, what's the incentive? Yeah,
I think our unemployment compensation world does need some reforms. There's a number of issues. We want to reward people for trying to find good work and allow them to do that. And we want to help people who are most in need. But we also don't want people to stay on unemployment for too long. We find that if people stay on for too long, it's harder and harder for them to find work because they get out of that workforce mentality, and it's a little harder for them to get the confidence to go out and look. And it's harder for employers to find these people. So I think we do need to do some important reforms. And also in that regard, on the tax side of things, we have one of the highest state unemployment tax rates. And the good employers that are staying in business end up paying that. So it's a dual-edged sword. We want to contribute, we want to be part of the solution, and we want to help people who are unemployed. On the other hand, we're carrying this huge tax burden and one of the highest in the country.
We should throw a plug in. I told you Laurie's a business owner. Tell us about your business. That you
Oh,
own.
thanks. Yes, I am a small business owner myself, an LLC, and I have a restaurant in downtown Concord, which is one of the reasons why I can be in the legislature, because my business is 1 mile from the State House, and so I can do both. It is really, as you know, being in the State House is effectively a volunteer job, but it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. We love it. But it does take a lot of time away from your business, so it is hard for a lot of business owners to do both, run a business and serve in the legislature. But I can, because my business is so close, and I can manage
Well, what's your business? Tell us.
It is a restaurant. We make all of our food from scratch. It's all homemade. We call it comfort food. So it's homemade macaroni and cheese, homemade shepherd's pie, big half-pound Angus burgers, hand-cut French fries. We smoke all of our own meats, so we do pulled pork and ribs and those kinds of things. We make our own sauces, fresh soups every day, specials every day. We have a sports theme, so we have 50 flat-screen, high-definition TVs as well, and a private function room upstairs where we host a number of different events, whether political or wedding parties or birthday parties. And like I said, we're right on South Main Street in Concord.
Tell us the name.
Oh, the Draft. It's called the Draft Restaurant.
We're going to teach you some marketing.
I know, I apologize. I'm not used to doing the self-promotion.
Do you guys do the cook? You have a chef?
We have a chef. My husband is a great cook, thankfully, so I don't have to do that. And he has come up with a lot of the recipes, and he oversees that. But we do have chefs that do the day-to-day for us.
So now he's not going to get mad at you for this, but you know what? You just booked him on my show. You understand?
That's great. He would love that.
So I started a new cooking show.
I heard.
And I like to have political guests. The speaker's going to come in, the mayor. We just had an alderman last week, so we'd love to have the senator come in.
Great.
He can cook what he wants, and we do it at GM Roth. It's an amazing, well, actually, maybe in your case, we could even do it at your restaurant if you wanted to.
Sure.
But talk to the senator.
Okay,
so
we will do
before
that.
I forget, it's going to be a date on that.
Yes, my husband is Senator Andy Sanborn, and he is a phenomenal cook. I am not a phenomenal cook, but I enjoy eating.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the State House. Is it what you expected? What do you think of it? Give us a review of your first term.
I absolutely love it. I highly recommend it. This is a citizen legislature, and it's important that everyone take their turn. And I'm so glad that I'm at a point that I can take my turn and serve. You know, you reach a point in your life where you feel like you have enough experience that you can really contribute something, that you have solutions, that you can understand this legislation and its impact on people. And I'm at that point in my life, and it's very exciting. It's a lot more work than I expected, but I think to some extent it's how much you put into it.
Sure.
And I've really dove in with both feet. I got excited about this business coalition. I'm very interested in making sure New Hampshire is the best state in the nation to live, to work, to own a business, and to enjoy yourselves. And I'm a fourth-generation New Hampshire native. This is my home. This is where I plan to be. This is where my family is. And I feel strongly that we have to preserve its traditions and make sure it's set up to be very successful going forward. And if you're not involved, it's hard to complain from the outside. You really have to roll up your sleeves, get involved. And I love it. It's, like I said, it's more hours than I think I expected, but it is the best learning opportunity ever.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It's amazing. I feel like I'm in a doctorate program. All the topics I'm coming up against that I'm having to learn about, all the people that I'm meeting from all over the state, it's fantastic.
Well, to your credit, I think that which you could probably share with people next term, and I've been trying to tell a lot of the people, as you see we were dealing with, especially yesterday, it's almost rude in a way to go in. It'd be like me going into your restaurant and not even paying any attention. I'm going to become a chef there, and not listening to the chef that you have already with experience to tell me how to do something. Just I'm going to do it myself anyway. And I think that if you don't look at it as a learning experience, at least the first half of your first term, you could see we have some people that came in there that just they're bomb throwers, and it's hurting us.
There's a huge learning curve, and I think a lot of people who were elected this year came from kind of an activist mentality. They were very active and they were angry about some things, so they got elected, and that's wonderful. But when you are elected and now you're an official and you are representing other people, you kind of have to take a little bit different mentality, and now you're in governance mode. Mm-hmm. You really have to come across as wise and sage, and it does require understanding some of the traditions of the House, the parliamentary procedures of the House, the decorum, and you know, we've learned a lot, and there's a lot to learn, and I think I really admire the folks that have stayed in the State House for many years, and we need to always marry that, so you always should have some fresh,
that's right,
new people in, and then you should always have some people who've been for a long time, so you can balance both of those.
I know myself, the thing that probably hit me the most is when I first went there, and you know, especially you're in business, you know, if you, and now that you're in leadership now, and you know, in business, if someone's not doing what you want in your business, you could just fire them. In this, you can't fire an elected official.
Right.
So that was one thing, but the thing that got to me is I thought it was kind of corny and hokey with especially in committee, where you'd have to say follow up and, you know, all the procedures that we would do there. Mm-hmm. And then after I realized, if you didn't do that, it would be just a complete chaos.
Yes. I actually like the procedures. I like that
decorum.
Now,
yeah.
And yeah, it takes a little getting used to at first, because yeah, in a business meeting, you're in a conference room, you just speak your mind, you don't have to ask permission, and that is a little bit weird at first, but once you get used to it, it flows very nicely, it keeps everything kind of under control, and we have a lot of, you know, contentious issues to discuss, and if we can make sure it's always kept polite and professional and timely and appropriate, I think that's important, because we really do have to vet, as you know, 1,000 bills a year. We need to have some order to doing it.
So you're going to do it again?
Yes, I am going to run for office again.
It does kind of get in your blood a little bit.
Well, it does, partly because I feel like we've started some things. I know we've started some things with this House Business Coalition that I'd really like to continue. We've made some great progress, but we have a lot of work to do. And I'd like to continue that, not forever, obviously, but you know, for a few more years, as long as I can, as long as my business allows me to do this, as long as my husband's health is good, my health is good, let's keep working for New Hampshire.
And you know, I think too, I think so many other states could learn so much from us.
Yes.
I love the volunteer aspect of it. I don't think I would change that. I don't know if we need 400 of us, but
it's a lot to manage.
It's, you know, I don't know. That's a whole nother story.
Yes,
but
it is.
I do like the volunteer aspect of it.
I do too. You know, I've had the opportunity to meet with legislators in many different states, and they're surprised at first at how large our legislature is, but then they're in awe about how wonderful the process is. You know, in other states, if you submit a bill, the Speaker or the Senate President can take that bill and put it into his desk, and it never sees the light of day. And that's not the case in New Hampshire. Every single bill, as you know, gets a full public hearing, at least in committee, and then goes to the full House floor. If it's lucky enough to make it through there, then it goes to the full Senate. So we truly vet the issues. Now, some people might call it crazy. Some of these bills may be on topics that people don't think are important to them, but it is important to someone. And as representatives of constituents who come to us with problems, concerns, ideas, we have an obligation to present those to the full consideration of the House.
Plus, imagine the situation we'd be in if we had a paid legislature with our budget.
Right.
And add all that to it.
Right.
And you see the mess that you're in Washington. You know, when we've created these positions now, there's people that it's a career. Mm-hmm, it is. And I just never believed that politics per se should ever be a career. I don't have any political aspirations as a career. I like doing what I'm doing. I hope to go one more term and then at least take a break. I believe anyways, to me, you know what? I don't care what the position is. I think every term should be 1 6-year term. I really
like
start
the
to believe
idea
it.
of
Just
term
one,
limits.
I don't care what it is.
Yeah.
President, congressman, state rep, governor, you serve one, because especially like congressmen, especially U.S. Congress, you're in for a year, then you're campaigning. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's crazy. In the state of New Hampshire, it's like close to $1 million to run for Congress. I just don't understand that. Yeah. If you have a 6-year term and you go and you serve, you know, you serve a good solid 6 years. You campaign to get in, now you're in, You're not really. I guess you'd be a lame duck in your last year, maybe, but.
I think a lot of people are worried about politicians being corrupt or making the wrong decisions, and I feel really good about New Hampshire politics because it's really hard to be corrupt. I mean, we're basically volunteers, as you know. We get paid $100 a year. There's no bonus to be in leadership. There's no extra money. There's no health insurance. I mean, there's really no financial considerations. We have to run and raise money, and the most generally that most people can give is $1,000. So it's hard for us to be bought. So I just don't see any corruption in New Hampshire politics, and I love that. And I think hopefully that continues to attract the right people to New Hampshire politics. And then when they can't contribute their time, they move on. That's the way it should be.
For the most part. We're almost out of time. I don't think we gave your website for people who want to look more into the Business Coalition.
We would love for you to check out the website. It's called probusinessnh.com. And it'll be a great place for you to look at new op-eds that we write on business-related issues, updates on pro-business bills that we have passing. And then also, if you'd like to keep in the loop, you can join our email list, and we'll keep you up to date on events. We have a Business Roundtable series coming up soon. We did this Business Roundtable series with the presidential candidates, and it's an opportunity for businesses to talk to their candidates about business-related issues. And a lot of times businesses are so busy running their businesses and dealing with all that, they don't have time to pay attention to politics. And we want to make sure that they are involved. We have that dialogue going. So this Business Roundtable series will be with all the governor candidates from both parties, and we'll make sure that businesses have an opportunity to ask them some tough questions.
I can't wait to have our next governor be a Republican.
That would be nice.
Well, Laurie, thank you very much for coming in, and the half hour went by pretty fast.
It sure did, but thanks for having me.
We'll have you back again, and I'll
hope so.
See you in Concord.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Okay.
Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the People's View, and I'm really honored, and it's a pleasure to have me, my buddy Cliff Hurst. We'll go into some of our background, how we met. We met before, but how we really got to know each other this past campaign season. And now it'll be fun for Cliff to be on the side campaigning over helping someone else campaign. But before we get started, I'm going to have Cliff go in and tell you a little bit about him because he's got a lot to tell you.
Okay. Well, thank you, first of all, Pete, for having me as your guest. And I look forward to being with you. I grew up, like I've mentioned, in the city of Wolcott, Vermont, a city of about 700 people.
Where's that in Vermont?
It's 15 miles from Stowe, Vermont, the ski capital. And I was really proud that we had running water. There was a brook by our house.
Well, before you go any further, now, how does a Republican like you come from Vermont? That's a story right there. Did it change?
Well, you have to understand that back when Senator Aiken, and Vermont was a very Republican state. It's totally transformed now, but it used to be a Republican state.
So you grew up there. When did you come here?
Actually, I came to New Hampshire when I was a sophomore in high school and worked on highway construction for the Palazzi Corporation. They were a major corporation of road builders in New England and built a good lot of the interstate system, and especially in Vermont and New Hampshire, but at that time it was New Hampshire. So I worked during my high school and college years as a laborer and eventually learned to be a grade foreman before I went to college. And then after college, I came back as their youngest superintendent.
Did you work on any roads we'd know now?
Yeah, we, well, 93, 89, 91 in Vermont. In fact, I became a Rhodes Scholar.
There's one thing people are going to learn about Cliff. Cliff is Captain Pun. You'll see in a little while.
And because I was a Rhodes Scholar, after I graduated from college, I was just back a short while when I got a letter from one of my uncles. This particular one's name is Sam. And
Does he have a big, tall hat?
He has a big, tall hat. And because I was a Rhodes Scholar, they wanted me to go to a private school. You know, everybody doesn't get to go to a private school in America, but I did. And the private school was located in New Jersey. It was called Fort Dix, New Jersey.
Yeah, that's a pretty exclusive private school.
It is a good private school, and
Were you a private at the private school?
I was a private at the private school. I had a
Okay.
private room.
There you go.
And actually, it was the beginning of the build-up for the Vietnam War, and I was selected for Officers Candidate School, and we were in this room, and there was a officer there who was speaking a little loud, and he said, "If there's anybody in this room that doesn't want to be an officer in the United States Army more than anything else, you can leave." That was one of the longest walks of my life. I left. But in our advanced training group, we didn't realize it, but at the time it was the build-up for the Vietnam War. And over 90% of our advanced training group got orders APO San Francisco, which meant Vietnam. I got APO New York, which meant Germany. Somebody asked, "Who do you know?" And I really didn't know anybody, but I ended up going to Germany. And actually, I got a European discharge and actually spent 10 years in Europe. I went to school in Switzerland, and maybe I could relate this story. It's a very unusual story because there was a shortage of chaplains in the military at that time, and my commander's wife had cancer, and my wife and I lived in to take care of, they'd married late in life and they had young children. And we lived in for quite a while, and she eventually passed away. And so this officer happened to be a colonel, and he said to me, "Hurst, if there's anything I can ever do to help you," but he said, "One of the problems we're facing right now in the military is that there's a shortage of chaplains because they're all going to Vietnam," which they should with the war going on. "And I think you'd make a great chaplain," but I said, "I don't like the military." So about a month later, he called me into his office, and I go in and the adjutant's there, and I said, "I'm here to see the colonel," and he looked at me like, "I'm sure you are." And Colonel Kavner heard me, and he called me into his office and said, "You know, we have this plan whereby, you know, you can get a European discharge," which they weren't giving at that time, and I know a friend who has a seminary in Switzerland, and we'd like to see you go down there, and you could come back as a civilian clergy to the military. So we finally decided to do it. We loaded a trunk on our little Volkswagen Bug and headed down through the Black Forest into Switzerland. It wasn't long after that, probably about 3 months into the classes, that I got a call from this colonel, and he said, "We need you at the Landstuhl Medical Center." And I said, "I'm not ready." He said, "Hurst, you're ready." So I would go up weekends, and never having spoken in public and not sure what to do, and pretty sick to my stomach going up and coming back first few trips, but it worked out, and eventually through study and correspondence I completed and was ordained and became a chaplain there and served a lot of the military and civilian personnel, and loved being there in Europe, and stayed there for 10 years, visited all of Europe. It was a great experience, and my oldest son was actually born in Germany. Then I came back. I really thought I did this for a time, and I didn't want any title or anything, but I would want to be Cliff Hurst. Not that I would be different or anything, but be the same person. And I got involved in the Plaza Corporation. My father had been head of public relations, and I did that. And then in 2003, Ray Wazurek, our governor's counselor, came to me and said, "The city committee is in trouble, and I think you could help us." So he nominated me, and I was elected chair of the Manchester Republican Committee. I served that 1 year, and it wasn't a good year. And at the end of the year, I was leaving the meeting, and I said to him, "Well, I've done my year." He said, "You've got another year." He said, "You've been talking about electing a Republican mayor, and if you aren't here, we won't do it." And so everybody said, "Cliff, I don't think this is going to happen," but Frank Ginta became our candidate and was elected mayor.
Now, how long was it in Manchester before since they had a Republican mayor?
You know, that's a good question. See, Ray Wazurek served for 10 years as the mayor, or close to 10 years as the mayor of Manchester. Did an amazing job. But I don't know how long it had been between that time and this mayor, but
It's pretty much a Democratic town.
yes, all the aldermen, 12 of the 14 aldermen are Democrats. We do have a Republican mayor now, but I think Frank kind of changed the situation there. I thought he was a very effective mayor, and of course, Mayor Gatsas is doing an excellent job right now.
Well, let's tie that into, because that's really why you're here, which I think is really important. Why don't you tell everyone what position you're running for, so it'll make sense why we're having this conversation that we're having.
Okay, I'm running for vice chair of the State Republican Committee, and the reason I'm running is I actually have three goals in mind. One is to unify the party, and I know people can say unified the party, and maybe it's a good thing to say, but I'm not saying it because I think it's a good thing to say. I think it's a good thing to do. And I want to make sure that everybody knows that they matter. I mean, I released 115 names last week of supporters. And I would go to some people and say, would you be my supporter? And they said, but I don't matter. But I said, you do matter. Everybody matters. And you've got to realize that if you're a human being, you know, you're important and you matter and you have influence. And so unifying the party, I think, is important. I was chair of the Republican Committee 3 different times, 04, 05, and then 2010. And in 2010, we involved almost 1,000 people in the Republican Committee, and we had a great year. We had a candidate fair that year, and we had almost 600 people there. We had buttons said "Make It Right" in 2010. They were $20.10 a piece, and that was the entrance into the fair. And we sold all the buttons plus, and raised about $11,000 that day. So I think it's important for people to have an involvement financially too in the party. But one of the things that I found is that we could unify people. It didn't matter if they were Tea Party, Libertarian, Rhino, whatever you called them. It was amazing when you got people together how much you could accomplish. And I think, you know, a lot of people talk about President Reagan, you know, and toss the name around. But I think really understanding how he was successful was that he cared about everybody. He made everybody feel like there was hope, you know, and that there could be a great future. And so my first thing is unifying the party. My second thing is to have strong committees, because I realized what a difference it made when we were electing our representatives. Mm-hmm. I think we had 7 or 8 representatives from Manchester. And that year, I think we went up to 24 or 25. And, you know, that was probably the hardest thing, recruiting those candidates and recruiting people that seemed to really care about having a change in government. And then my third goal is to have an adequate staff at our state office. We have actually 2 paid staff members. When Governor Sununu was the chair, they had 6 paid staff members. And I would go in to see the executive director, and sometimes he'd put his hands up to his head like, Cliff.
So why do we have only 2 now?
Money.
And so was it because Sununu could raise money that we don't have it now, or is it why don't we have it now?
Well, I think it because apparently, you know, but there's some good things happening. I don't want to paint a bad picture of the state party, because Bill Binney is the new finance chair, yeah. And Jim Foley's the vice chair, and I was at a finance meeting at the Chop House recently. And they've really paid off a lot of old debt. They've really done a great job, but we need to do more. And I think they've got a new program. It's a grassroots fundraising where people can commit to maybe a certain amount each month. It's not a large amount, but if we had, then there's 2 levels, but I think if we had 1,000 people in each of those levels, I mean, it would just change everything, and I think people would feel more involved. But I think, you know, people ask me, how are you going to raise money? Well, I think if people like you, they're more apt to give.
Sure they are.
And I think that my skills are people's skills, and I think I can make a difference that way.
Well, the other thing I think that what's going to happen this time, and you know this better than me because you've been around longer, and you know, Manchester and Nashua are fairly similar in makeup and size and being number 1 and number 2. all these rookies that came in last time, you know, we had a situation here. One of the people who was elected took his name off the ballot, and it was too late. So it was still on, or I should say, got out of the campaign. It was too late to get his name off the ballot. He got elected anyway. And it was in the district that I was in, which was the super district, one of the super districts. There was 10 seats. Of the 10 seats in 2008, my first term, the only Republicans were myself, newly elected, and then Pam Price, who was a 5-time incumbent. The rest were all Democrats. This time, all 10 seats went to Republicans. And in the city of Nashua, we had 28 seats. Of the 28 seats, there was only 5 Republicans. Now, there's 22 Republicans. So a lot of them think it's kind of easy. But I don't know about Manchester. In Nashua, the Democrats didn't campaign. It was nothing like it was in 2008. Now, you know, 2008 was it was obviously a presidential year, and it was a big sweep for Republicans. Like, I mean, Democrats, kind of like what we had in the presidential term. But I think this time they'll be back out again. And I think that we can't take for granted, you know, what you did with Ginta was hard work. You know, they went out, they worked, and, you know, Gary Lambert and Jim Luther for senators here that forever have been Democratic senators. I mean, I think the seat that Lambert won was, last time was like 1970, that there was a Republican in.
Well, it's really interesting because I think when you put your mind to something and really work hard, it makes a big difference. I mean, everybody thinks, you know, things are easy. But I mean, in 2010, I spent most of my time not on my work, but almost on the committee, you know, just doing the committee. When Frank was elected mayor of Manchester, Karl Rove came to me soon after that and said it was the biggest victory in the United States in the Republican Party. You know, you think about that, you know, I mean, things were bad at that time. Had I known probably how bad they were, maybe I wouldn't have believed as strongly, but I just went ahead and had a positive attitude, because I think when you're positive, it's amazing what can happen. And see, I don't hate anybody. I think hate is very destructive. Love is very powerful. And I have a lot of friends in the Democratic Party. I think it's a different philosophy. Obviously, you have a difference in philosophy. And I think if you can communicate that, you know, and build a relationship, at least maybe we can get more done even that way too, you know. I mean, I think we should speak out when something is wrong and make it clear why we disagree. But we're not angry or mad necessarily. We just disagree.
Well, I think too, in our party, I'm as biased as they come, I suppose, but if we just tell our story, if you could just talk to whoever you talk to, you just, like Dragnet, just the facts, ma'am. You know, if you just give the facts, it does the rest. The idea is to get out there and give the facts.
Yes.
You know, if you just sit back and think, well, I'm just going to get elected,
no,
it's not going to work.
No, it isn't. And, you know, we have some amazing people in our party. We really do. And the more I know the people, the more amazed I am. And what I feel is like this is an opportunity for me that I'm so excited about and so happy to have this opportunity, because I love doing this. I mean, I really do. I have a great passion for people and to do what's right. You know, I mean, I think we're facing a lot this year. You know, we want to elect a Republican governor, and I believe we will. But we need to hold what we have to in the House and the Senate with our governor's counselors. You know, there's a lot to do, but I think we can get it done. And I admire so much you and the people that are serving in the House and the Senate, because it's a real sacrifice. But something I believe, and I haven't really said it enough, but I started saying it towards the end of my time in this last term as chair of the Republican Committee in Manchester, was after our family and our spiritual life, the most important thing we do is our service to our country. And I see
Absolutely.
Public service, you know, public servants serving. And New Hampshire is probably one of the greatest examples of this in the free world.
You can't beat it.
I mean, there's nothing like New Hampshire.
I told the the rookies when they came in this past session. Carl, who can't be with us today, he stood next to me, and then we sat next to each other because it was kind of alphabetical. So when you're a rookie, that's how they did the seating chart. And of course, we weren't in charge. This time I got to do the seating chart because we were in charge. I made some good seats, by the way. That's another story for another day. But I remember standing there taking my oath, and I had to hold back tears. It was emotional for me to be in this hall of all the history that's there. And to this day, when I go in there, it's only my second term, I respect it. I'm honored by it. You don't even think about the money part of it. And it's too bad that can't be throughout the country, because I think we'd all be better off. If every state had a legislative body like New Hampshire, it'd be a better country to live in, because it would all carry right to Washington. They'd all know this how it works. Most start at the state level anyway.
Well, talking about our experience with Governor Perry, this was one of the things that he said, why not have a volunteer almost?
I really love that.
At a national level, and so people would have a real job and go there for a while and then go back. And
that experience, one of the things, not to patronize you, but I'm in all seriousness, when we had our little meetings on Tuesdays and meeting people like you and starting to get to know some of the people that were in that room, that I just didn't think we could lose. I used to tell everyone, we're going to win. I still am numb over that it's a lesson that you can't get in something like that. You got to do it.
Get in early.
Very early.
Yes, yeah, because especially with New Hampshire, there's nothing like the New Hampshire primary, because it's really almost the only place other than the Iowa caucus where you can actually go out and meet the people, get into house parties. It's an amazing.
Yeah, it wasn't him.
First in the nation.
It definitely was the campaign. I don't think it was him. Because I met all of them. I didn't have them all at my house, but most of them were either on my radio show or they called in. Some of them more than once. He just had an aura about him. So did his wife. I think you were probably there the day that when I stood up at the end of the meeting and I just said, I'm a director of sales for a Johnson & Johnson company, and if I was given the #1 knee, and within 60 days I made it to number 4 or 5, I'd get fired. And he was the #1 knee. When he came in, he's the only candidate to be in the 30s. 30%, to this day, no one's hit the 30 percentile range.
Oh, and Anita, too, she was just amazing.
I call her the secret weapon.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, can't have sour grapes, but hopefully he'll do it again.
I think he will.
He's still
young
enough.
Get started early enough and have a good campaign.
I think he learned his lesson, and I think that we just got to hope that I was too young for Reagan. When Reagan came in, I was just 20, and I always wanted to be able to be excited behind a candidate. And after being in this special position I was in, being in leadership this time, they were been courting me from day one, except him. I had to ask him on a date, him asking me. But he's the only one that I just, wow, this will be unbelievable. I was convinced. I told everyone I was going to become the ambassador to New Zealand. Don't ask me where I picked New Zealand from, but I said, he's going to win. I'm going to be the ambassador to New Zealand. I'm not going to be in the Kiwi anytime soon, I don't think. But.
Well, it was really interesting because when Palenti dropped out, we had a very close relationship. And when he dropped out, Sean Mahoney, I was talking with Sean, and Sean says, well, maybe it's too soon for you, but we're having an event at the Ponte restaurant, and I'd like to have you come down. And I went down, and so they put me at the table with the Perrys, and I was sitting next to Anita one side and their son Griffin on the other. And she said, Cliff, how's it going? I said, not good. She says, what's wrong? I said, I lost my candidate and I lost my girlfriend, because Mary Palenti always kidded, that I was her boyfriend. She says, well, let's see what we can do. I know Rick can be your candidate, and I'm going to call Mary. So the next time I saw her, I said, "Did you call Mary?" She says, "No, I didn't call her, but we're all set."
She had quick wit, everything. See, I started with Palente. I met Palente early on. He was in Concord like 2 years ago.
Yeah.
He was the keynote speaker. I forget what event.
Yeah, he was, well, for the Senate PAC. He came to raise
That's
money
what it
for the
was.
Senate PAC. I think that was in December because he wanted to come by my office. I said, "But why don't you come by the house?" Because we'd been out at the convention. So we were sitting with his wife, Mary, and his advisor, Phil Musser. And in the conversation, they were amazing people, but in the conversation, he said, I'm part Polish. I said, "Well, then you're going to win the New Hampshire primary." He said, "Cliff, how can you say that? You just met me." I said, "We always take a poll."
Yeah, we had to have at least one more of those in there. See, no, he's the one with him. I think what happened it's almost the same thing with Perry. When I first met Palente, I came home and told my wife, because they're very close in birthdays. He's like August 19th, and she's the 18th, something like that, but the same year. And that speech he did, he was great. He was himself. He tried reinventing himself once he started running.
Well, I think he listened too much
That's
to
what
advisors.
I mean. And I think Perry was the same way.
Yeah, because people said, "This is not Palente."
Yeah, everyone picked up on it. And Perry, the same thing. We saw him in the town hall things. The guy was great in town hall settings. So whoever coached him for the
It's really
debates,
critical, really,
it
to
is.
have the right people.
It is. Well, we're almost out of time, but I want to make sure that now, do you have a website or do you have a email address? People want to email you, get a hold of you.
Actually, do I mind if I give my business
I would love
email?
For you to do it. Sure.
We founded a wealth management company called Hurst and DeGraff and Reed Wealth Management. I was one of the founding partners. So my email is cliffhurst@hdwealthmanagement.com.
Very good. And now, when is the election's in April, isn't it?
April 14th.
April 14th. And
it's in Meredith, New Hampshire, at the Interlakes Regional High School.
I know where that is. That's my sneak way to go. Well, it's not sneak to go to North Conway. I like going that way.
Yeah.
To go up that way.
Actually, I was in North Conway actually it was close to North Conway for the Carroll County meeting. I'm going to be in North Conway again on Saturday night at their Lincoln Reagan dinner. Then I'm going to be in Conway again later in the month for the Mount Washington Valley Republican Committee. But I love that part of the country.
Well, I want to thank you for coming in. We'll have you back again, and we'll see you around up at the State House. Cliff Hurst, everybody.
Thank you for being such a good friend.
And thank you for all you do for our state.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week. And I'm not sure who the guests will be, but I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Take care, everyone.